This video is an opportunity for me to give you an outline to why I find education so significant and why I'm so driven about teaching. It's going to be in an outline form. And if there's any question that you might have about any particular detail, all you have to do is email me or call me, or I'll give you all the information that you need. But what I'd like to do is just kind of briefly go over uh, why I am so driven about education and why it's so significant to my life. Um, so the first point on the outline is I was born during World War II. Um, in fact, I was born just a month or two before my father was shipped overseas to the South Pacific, where he was a battalion commander in an anti-aircraft battery. Uh, he returned to the United States after the war was over, uh, and I was toddling around. He had a wife, a kid, and a new child coming along quickly, and he went back into the workforce without going to college. Um, Several years later, he was given an opportunity to transfer from kind of the metropolitan area of Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He took that opportunity, but when he went to Pittsburgh, he asked a real estate agent where was the best school system in the community or the metropolitan area, and they told him Mount Lebanon. Since he didn't go to college because of the war, he was going to make sure his three children would get to go to college. And therefore, he wanted the best school system to prepare them for that experience in college. The problem for me was that I went from an average school system in Pensacola, New Jersey, where I was above average, to Mount Lebanon. Mount Lebanon was not only the best school system in Pittsburgh, it was the 19th best school system in the entire country. Mount Lebanon also was a very wealthy community beyond our economic means. So I went from above average student in an average school system to feeling like I was far less than average in a superb school system. So I felt within the Mount Lebanon system and the feeling of living in that community, I felt two things. I felt dumb and I felt poor. Now that was a mistake that I made. Living in a wealthy community and a superb school system and getting average grades made me feel both dumb and poor, when in fact I wasn't dumb and poor, but I didn't realize that at the time. Went out, got my college education, got a graduate degree, and went into working and did all right, except for the fact that I wanted to go further, and therefore I went out and got my doctorate. My first course when I was getting my doctorate at McCormick Theological Seminary, I got an A in. Whoa. The next class I got an A in. The next class I got an A in. I aced all except for one class, including my thesis. And then I realized that perhaps I had made a mistake. Maybe I wasn't as dumb as I thought I was. And that opened the gates to teaching for me. And the reason that I that I am so driven about teaching is that I don't want to have any of my students make the same mistake that I made when I was going through college or graduate school. You know, I put 2 and 2 together and came up with 18, and that was a mistake. And I can't protect all my students from making mistakes in life, but that's one mistake that I can help them with. And therefore, every semester, the beginning of every semester for the past 2 decades, every class that I've ever taught will read an interview about this, about feeling dumb and poor, and they have to write an essay, an 1,000-word essay for every student that I've taught for 20 years. And the title of the essay is, "Why in the Hell is Camel Making Me Read This Interview?" And what's a profound effect upon them is that they can identify with me. And through that process, them writing that article or that essay, and also dealing with me in the classroom or online, they have learned that they aren't dumb. So the traumatic experience of going from Pensacola, New Jersey to Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, initially that was a trauma. After a couple of years, I realized that it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Went from trauma to a blessing. That's item 1 on my outline. Item 2 is that about 7 years ago, I danced with death. I fell off of a ladder and hit the back of my head on a stone wall, and created what the doctors call subdural hematoma, or bleeding on the brain, or traumatic brain injury. I was in ICU for 4 weeks. I recognized all my family, talked to them. Those 4 weeks, I don't remember the fall. I don't remember going to the hospital. I don't remember being in the hospital. I don't remember leaving the hospital. That happened 7 years ago. 7 years ago also, I went to the University of Chicago for a prostatectomy because I had cancer of the prostate. So that was my second dance with death. The surgeon who robotically took out the prostate said to me it was a successful operation, but the cancer had gotten outside the prostate, and that therefore every 6 months I had to go back and get my PSA tested. Did that a couple of years, and the cancer had gotten outside the prostate and was coming up with a higher PSA number, and went back for radiation and hormone therapy, and I'm cancer-free now. Those 2 traumas of dancing with death turned out to be blessings. And if you go to my webpage at wolverinemountain.com and look under articles and go onto the right-hand side of that page, and you'll see critical issues. There's a couple issues dealing with death. Randy Pausch, who was a professor at Carnegie Mellon, had pancreatic cancer, and his last lecture at Carnegie Mellon was about the way he views life. And what's interesting is the way he views life is the way I view life. And I would not have viewed life that way had I not danced with death. In fact, Randy Pausch, during his lecture, about 9 months before he actually died, was more alive in that class on his last lecture than anybody else in that audience, and there were several thousand people there. But the list of people who have danced with death is long. And they all say the same thing. Having danced with death, they realize life is valuable, more valuable than you can imagine. And therefore, I am more driven today than I ever have been. Back in the 60s, the civil rights movement was going on in America, and I thought then that I was driven. Today, I am driven many times more toward everything in life that I experienced than I was back in the 60s. Education is the one thing that will help everybody move beyond where they are to where they want to be. So, number one was the trauma of feeling dumb and poor. The second one was dancing with death. The third part of my outline about what is so significant to me about education is that I have 3 adult children, all of whom have gone to college. I have a granddaughter who is 20, who's halfway through college. And now I have 2 grandchildren, one who is 5 and one is 3. And the interesting thing is that when the oldest one, Jack, who's now 5, but when he was 3, I was there in his home babysitting for him, and I was on my laptop, and I was teaching a class in art history. And I was looking over the PowerPoint that I had done, and he toddles in and says, "Papa, what's that on the computer?" And I said, "That's a famous painting by so-and-so." And I wish I remember who it was. And I said, "It was a famous painting." And he said, "Oh." And he toddled off again, came back 10 or 15 minutes later and said, "Hey, Papa, what's that?" I said, "That's another famous painting." And I said, you know, that painter is like you are, Jack. You draw and you paint. He's just a little older than you are, and you're doing the same thing he is. And I'm telling you that I was heavily involved in education, and what I did not know was that 3-year-olds want to learn. Another trauma. I made a mistake. And I thought to myself, Jack, if you want to learn about art history, I'll teach you. Jack is now 5 years old. Owen is now 3 years old. Jack can identify easily a half a dozen different artists and probably 50 or 60 different paintings, and identify the name of the painting and the artist who painted them. His favorite painting is Marc Chagall's Eye in the Village, and Owen's favorite painting is the Drawbridge at Arles by Van Gogh. I made a mistake that 3-year-olds, I had 3 children that were 3-year-olds at a time, and a granddaughter who was 3-year-old at one time. And it never dawned on me. I helped them learn things, but I didn't understand their drive to understand things that they don't understand in their world as they see it. And therefore, Jack and Owen are getting art history. Several months ago, when Jack was like 4 or 4.5, he and I were in the backyard of my house, which is on a man-made lake, and we were throwing rocks in, and he picked up the rock and said, "What's this?" And he saw fossils, shells in this piece of rock. Now, I've learned my lesson about children, and so what I said, Jack, what we need to do is start to learn fossils. I mean, he loves dinosaurs. He now has a fossil collection, he and his brother, of probably 50 different fossils. He can identify the fossil. He knows where they're coming from, what they are. And what's interesting is that, and I guarantee you there's not a child in the entire world that knows this. And it's not because Jack is smarter than anybody else. It's because the parents don't pick up on it, or the grandparents don't. There's a fossil found by an American archaeologist in Argentina, which the archaeologist called Dreadnoughticus. And Jack wanted to know why that was the name of the dinosaur. And he has a textbook, which is a loose leaf binder that I put together. And he has numerous art history pictures of artists' paintings, but he also has a lot of fossils. And he also has the picture of Dreadnoughticus. And next to it is the HMS Dreadnought, World War I battleships of the British Navy. They were huge, and the American archaeologists that discovered this large dinosaur wanted to pay tribute to the size of this dinosaur, and he calls it in Latin for dreadnought, which is Latin, or the Latin word for dreadnought is Dreadnoughticus. So we have 3 things that drive me in education. One is that I don't want people to feel dumb. The second is that I came alive because I nearly died. And now I have been taught by 2 young toddlers that I hadn't seen the complete light of day about education. I was so preoccupied by college-age kids, even though I had 3 of my own children and a granddaughter, I missed how driven they are about education. Those 3 issues drive me. You go to my webpage, Wolverton-mountain.com, and click on articles, and there's 25 years of articles about all sorts of things. But in the last several years, my writing has exploded because it is my opportunity not just to, use these articles all the time in class, but I also use them with Jack and Owen, and you'll find articles. Just go to wolvertonmountain.com, wolverton-mountain.com. Click on articles, and you'll find tons of them. And this is one of the problems with people who have danced with death. Had I been in your shoes and had not danced with death, and I was listening to an interview about a person talking about the advantages of feeling poor and dumb in Mount Lebanon, dancing with death and kids, I'm being honest with you, I don't think I'd taken it really seriously. The guy seems like he's a nice guy, but talk to somebody who's danced with death or who has gone from what experience I had from Pennsauken to Mount Lebanon, or had grandchildren in the twilight years of their life. Talk to them about how they feel about education. It is critically important. And I thought that I was driven in the civil rights movement. I did all sorts of things. And some, looking back on it, I could have wound up dead. But I am more driven today than I was back in the 60s. I am more alive today than I was 40 years ago. I love teaching. If you need any more details on any parts of my outline about significance of education to me, let me know. But it is critical that we teach. Thank you for listening to this outline. I'm sorry it's been longer than I anticipated, but if you have any questions, simply get back to me. I'd love to talk to you about it. In the meantime, you take care. And thanks for listening and watching.